All right, 2023 reading review. I'm going to try to be quick here because I have a lot to get to. But I want to just share with everybody what I was able to read this year. I had a great year. Read 85 books, which was my goal for the year. Let me just pull up what my goals were for last year really quick. I'll share my screen so you can see that. I don't want to do that. I just want to share the whole thing. Yeah, hopefully you can see that. So here were my goals for 2023 that I made in my last video. I wanted to do 30 fiction, 55 nonfiction. I wanted to do that pretty clean, pretty hard divided. I didn't end up doing that. I did hit 85 books, but it ended up being a different breakdown: 47 fiction, 38 nonfiction. I just loved the fiction books I was reading, really enjoyed the series that I was going through, and just ended up doing more fiction than I thought I would. And a lot of that ended up being because of hold times on the nonfiction books that I wanted. And also took me a little while to read some of the hard copies of the nonfiction books that I was reading since I couldn't find an audiobook of them, more technical language, things like that. So um, it just took me a little longer to read some of those nonfiction books. So balance got a little off. I'm okay with that. I reached 85 books. I thought I had overshot and I'd actually gotten 86, but it turns out I had something a little backwards in, or I had something in twice in Goodreads. So my counting was a little off. I had the books that I'd hoped to read this year. I didn't get to the Wheel of Time. That is going to be added to my goals for this year, but it's a 10 book series and each of the books are nearly 1,000 pages long. And so I didn't feel like I ever got to a point this year that I could commit to 10 books at that length. So I didn't get to that, but I did get to the C.S. Lewis books. I'll get to that in just a minute with Dr. Poe. I got to some of these with the green check marks here. The ones that I didn't get to, Kingdom Through Covenant, On Guard, all of those I'm hoping that I'm going to get to in the coming year. Chaos and Circle, Ted Dekker. I read those when I was a kid. I was thinking about going back and get to them, but I may or may not do that this year. I'm going to say probably not. I don't really know if I really want to. Again, Pilgrim's Progress, Charles Spurgeon read it every year of his life multiple times. So maybe I'll get to that one again. It's definitely worth the reread, but not sure if I'll get to it this year. And The Meaning of Marriage, I purchased the audiobook, so I can listen to it anytime. I just haven't gotten to rereading it yet, but hopefully I will. So I'm going to get over here on Goodreads. If you don't follow me on Goodreads, or if you don't have Goodreads yourself, I highly recommend it. I love it. And I think it's an excellent service to track your reading. It helps me especially because it helps me see where I'm at in my progress and my goals and stuff. I'm very much goal oriented. So I want to know, even when I'm just reading a single book, I want to know what page I'm on, how many more pages in that chapter, how many more pages in the book. Uh, just because I want to reach the end, and so it helps me track my goals for the year, which we'll get to in just a minute. But you can see here where I started the year. It will go this direction. So but I want to start out with the books I read on C.S. Lewis. So C.S. Lewis has been my favorite author since high school, or maybe even before that. I don't remember when I first read the Chronicles of Narnia, but I first read Mere Christianity when I was in high school, and I just fell in love with his writing style. I love the way he logically progresses through things. I don't agree with him on everything, obviously, and maybe I'll get to some of that later with some of the books, um, but I wanted to do a deep dive this year on C.S. Lewis. And so I started out the year, you see there, with a trilogy by Dr. Poe at Union on C.S. Lewis, biographies. I have books one and two in hard copies, and I ran through those and marked through those. I only had the third one in an audiobook, so I can't show that to you, but you see the cover there, the completion, yes, completion of C.S. Lewis. All three excellent. I really enjoyed getting to read through those. But of course, I also wanted to hear his story from his own mouth. And so Surprised by Joy was right there. And so I read a couple of books that were about C.S. Lewis, and I read a lot of his own works, the ones that he had written. And so of the ones that he wrote, I tried to get through most of his major stuff. So I reread through the Chronicles of Narnia. I read through this time in publication order, and I just love these new ones that I was able to get. Well, I say new, but they were very much used. And but these are printed in publication order, so it's got Prince Caspian's #2, Voyage of the Dawn Treaders #3, and so on. But just love this series. If you haven't read it, just you have to. It is one of, I think, the best series that's ever been written. I love it. It's for kids, it's for adults, it's for everyone. And every time you read it, you're gonna come away with more about it. And there's so many things relevant to the Christian life and to how we view God and different things like that. I just think so good, so good. And related to that is C.S. Lewis's Space Trilogy. I read those as well. The Space Trilogy, often overlooked, but I think some of his best work, especially book 2, which he himself said was his favorite book to write, Perelandra. The last couple of chapters of it, the last couple of pages especially, are just so powerful. I remember this year, it was a weird day where Taylor was doing something with the kids, and I had the day to myself for some reason. And I remember for some reason I decided to go to the mall, and so I took my book with me and I was reading through it. So I'm sitting in the middle of the Kentucky Oaks Mall, and I start crying in the last chapter of this book because it is just so powerful. It's so good. I can't recommend it enough. Everyone raves about That Hideous Strength, and I have to say it was good. It's a harder book. They say you should read The Abolition of Man before you read this one. I didn't read The Abolition of Man this year, but I did read it last year, so I understood what people were saying about that. It's just a tough book. It's very different from books 1 and 2, different main character, just different story arc in general. And so I wasn't sure quite what to expect when I got into book 3, That Hideous Strength. But now that I've read the whole book and now that I understand the whole story arc, the plot, what's going on, I think it is going to really reward on later readings. The first time it was like, okay, I'm kind of understanding what he's saying here, but I think in the future I'm going to definitely come back to this one, and I think it's going to be just a treasure, really. Book 1 is good. I mean, uh, they're just fun. They're just fun books. In book 1, he is taken, he's pretty much kidnapped and taken to Mars. And then in the second book, same main character, is taken to Venus. And then in the third book, again, completely different character. And so you're kind of confused, like, wait, when is Ransom, the main character, when is he going to show up? And he's kind of in the background, like not even really involved that much in this book. But I'm rambling. The Space Trilogy by C.S. Lewis. Love those. A couple of others of his fiction that I read. I read Till We Have Faces. People also rave about it, connect it to The Four Loves, which I also read. I didn't love Till We Have Faces. This is my second time reading it, and I'm still just not quite connecting with it. I mean, it's good. It's worth reading, I'd say, but it's not one of my favorites of his. The Four Loves was good. I had a misconception going into The Four Loves of what it was going to be. I really thought that it was, before I came to it, that it was going to make an argument that the four Greek words for love actually had different meanings, but that's not at all what he is trying to say. He's just using those Greek words or variations on them in order to communicate four different kinds of love that we have. He wasn't not making a linguistic argument or a grammatical argument, but rather just talking about the different kinds of love that we share with others. And so it was a good book. I really enjoyed it. The Pilgrim's Regress, kind of an allegorical look at his life and It's not like the Pilgrim's Progress, but in another sense, it is kind of like the Pilgrim's Progress, and it was really good. A lot of other literary references, some of which were over my head and referring to different worldviews that maybe I wasn't so familiar with, but still, the writing was really enjoyable. I thought it was really good. The Screw Tape Letters. This was my first time reading all the way through the Screw Tape Letters. I had started it before, but if you don't know about the Screw Tape Letters, it's written from the perspective. Well, it's a series of letters written by a demon to a demon. He is training his nephew demon how to take care of his patient, the human that he is seeking to wage spiritual warfare on. And so Screwtape is writing to his nephew Wormwood, and it's just such an interesting look at spiritual warfare, and it makes you, I guess, open your eyes and really think, like, how are the forces of darkness working against me in my life? And he, I think, shows many, many different ways that um, those demonic powers and things like that are working against us. And I mean, it's obviously it's a fictional book, and so you can't say this is exactly how spiritual warfare works, but it's very interesting. It's very good. It's entertaining, and it's convicting. I think in many parts, because you say, man, I am definitely guilty of doing what the patient is here doing. And so if you haven't read the Screwtape Letters, I highly recommend it. And then I read various of his signature works. I don't have them all in a single copy, but I have this. Well, I don't have them all in an individual copy. I have this large volume. I didn't go back to Mere Christianity this year. I think I read it last year or the year before, so I didn't go back to it. But I think I read most of the other um, signature classics. But anyway, uh, love these. So C.S. Lewis, so good. And books about C.S. Lewis. So again, that trilogy by Poe is very good. The first book especially, I found especially enjoyable. And then where is it? These were later in the year that I read these. Rigney, Joe Rigney, Lewis on the Christian Life. So good. I think it did an excellent job of kind of surveying C.S. Lewis's works and pointing to places where his teaching was really good, and it was honest in that it showed places where he probably got this wrong, and I think that was so good. Highly recommend that one. If you haven't read much of Lewis, I think this book will make you want to read more of him, and I think it's worth your time. Oh, I didn't mention A Grief Observed. I just read this a couple of weeks ago. I don't think it's his best work, but it does have a lot of really um really good observations in it about grief and about how different people experience grief. And so there were just a couple of lines in it where I was just like, man, I know exactly what you're talking about, and I feel that too. And if you don't know, Taylor and I have been going through a season of grief and mingled with joy. And so A Grief Observed was very good. And maybe I'll talk about some of these other books that I've been reading more recently in a minute. Miracles, I didn't love that one by him, but again, nuggets of good stuff in there. I was coming to The Romantic Rationalist, which is a series of essays written about him and about his work. John Piper, you see, David Mathis, Doug Wilson contributed to it, a couple of others. It was also very good in talking about his writings and his teachings, and it also was very honest about who he was, what he believed, and the places where he was faulty in different ways, and he certainly was. And before I move on from C.S. Lewis, I would go ahead and announce that I'm going to be teaching a Connect class here at Bethlehem on C.S. Lewis and his writing. It'll be kind of connected to this Lewis on the Christian Life. So if you wanted to read that, get kind of a head start on that. But that's going to be coming up in the spring. I'm really, really, really excited about it. Like I said, I just love reading C.S. Lewis. I think he's an excellent, excellent author. He wouldn't call himself a theologian, but he is, in a sense. We're all theologians, and so I think he's a great writer, and you should read more of him. I'll move on from C.S. Lewis, though. Some nonfiction highlights for this year. I've got these here. First of all, I wanted to read Providence by John Piper, and so I did. It's a monster. If you have ever read John Piper, or if you've ever listened to a John Piper sermon, you pretty much get John Piper in every single book that he reads. I mean, he gives you the same thing, the same message, and that message is that God is most glorified in us when we are most satisfied in Him. But he is shouting the glory of God on every page of Providence, and it was an excellent book. Like I said, if you've read Desiring God or Don't Waste Your Life, you're getting the same message, but here he unpacks it much more at length. But it was great. It was great. I loved it. It was very good. Here with the Clouds of Heaven was an excellent book on Daniel. Let me stop screen sharing for just a second because I've got some of these on hard copies. So stop share. With the Clouds of Heaven was a biblical theology of Daniel, so situating it in the whole narrative of the Bible, but also connecting it and making connections to the New Testament, to other Old Testament passages. And it was excellent. My Sunday school class is going through Daniel right now, and so this was a resource that I picked up to draw upon for that. It's not really a commentary, and so I read it kind of up front as we were starting Daniel, and I'm very glad I did. It's so good. It's really technical. Providence is pretty technical too. So you've got a lot of Hebrew and a lot of Aramaic in this one. A little bit of Greek when it's talking about the New Testament passages, but it's so good. If you're interested in the book of Daniel, interpretation of Daniel, it's definitely worth a read. Some of these other ones, let me see. How about The Unseen Realm by Michael Heiser? I initially, with this book, it was on my list to read for a long time. Initially, with this book, after I read it, I gave it 4 stars on Goodreads because I was like, what did I just read? I needed to process it for a while because it's called The Unseen Realm: Recovering the Supernatural Worldview of the Bible. And in it, he just talks about things in scripture that we don't talk about. We don't see, or at least with our Western eyes, we don't normally focus on these passages. And so it was very, very good. And initially, I gave it 4 stars because I was so like I didn't know what to do with this book. But at the end of the day, it was excellent. It was thought provoking. Again, very technical. Lots of Hebrew, lots of Greek in this one, but definitely worth reading. Talking about spiritual warfare, just talking about the spiritual aspects of life that we, in our kind of naturalistic context, we turn a blind eye to, and we kind of pretend it's not there. Sometimes we're probably guilty of that. But anyway, I did go back and revise my review to 5 stars because, man, it's just excellent, dense. I don't agree with everything Heiser says. I don't agree with all the emphases that he puts on certain things, but I think his argument in general is very, very sound. I think he lays it out in a very, very good way, and I would recommend it to you. It's a tough read. It will take time. You're gonna have to slog through this one, but it's good. But it's good. Go for it. The Baptist Story. So I taught a Connect class on Baptist history. This is one that I kind of got hung up on because as I was teaching that 6-7 week course, I was reading a couple of chapters of this a week in order to prepare. And so this is one of the nonfiction books that took me a while because I was doing a hard copy and I didn't want to get too far ahead of where I was in my class. But this one was so good. It taught me a lot of fun facts about being a Baptist. And if anything, I think it made me even more convictionally Baptist, which, I was already convictional Baptist, but I just love the fact that I am a Baptist and I love the Baptist story. Um, I'll let you check that one out. I'm not going to bore you with any historical details, but it's fun to read. It's written by Shute, Finn, and Haken, all excellent scholars. Highly recommend the Baptist story. A couple of these other ones that I read, Verdict on the Empty Tomb. It was a short read for Easter. Very good. Habits of Grace. I also taught a Connect class on this one. Highly recommend this one on the spiritual disciplines. The Five Voices, kind of a leadership book. Simply Trinity, it was good talking about the Trinity. I don't necessarily think I agree with his critique of eternal roles of authority and submission, but it's definitely thought provoking. I would still have to argue that out a little bit and nuance some things, but it was worth reading. And Typology by Jim Hamilton. I already mentioned him with the Daniel book. Really appreciate this book as well because it was just very, very interesting. It was like a whole book of cross references, like this is pointing to this, is pointing to this, is pointing to this. And so that one was a fun read. I really enjoyed it. Also very technical. So some of those stuff reads. Let's see. Is there any that I wanted to get to? Yes, that I don't have hard copies of. Let me share my screen again for this, and I'll point to first Dark Clouds, Deep Mercy. I read this one just a couple of weeks ago. It's about lament, about songs of lament in the Bible, and it was so good. It nourished my soul reading this one. I would highly recommend it to you. Um, let's see, Big Questions, the Big Questions series by Chris Morphew. So these are aimed toward kids, elementary age kids, I think third through fifth grade, around that age. Chris Morphew is actually a teacher at a school for this age kids, and he's written these books here. You can see it. How do we know that Christianity is really true? What happens when we die? Why does God let bad things happen? I thought that I read another one, but I don't see it here. Maybe those were the only ones that I read this year. But short books geared toward kids, really big questions that he breaks down so well. So good. I would highly recommend this to any parents with that age kids or maybe even younger. I don't know. What happens when we die? And I'm thinking about walking through that one slowly with Leah because of the hard year that we're anticipating coming up with. So, but all of these very good. How do we know that Christianity is really true? Especially focused on the resurrection and the truths of the gospel, apologetics, and why does God let bad things happen? Like the problem of evil, problem of pain and suffering. Such a good series. Again, aimed toward that younger audience. But even if you're an adult and you're asking those questions, then they are definitely applicable to you too. So check those out. Gavin Ortlund, Why God Makes Sense in a World That Doesn't. Where is that one? It's right here. I really enjoyed it. Gavin Ortlund has become one of my favorite theologians, I guess you could say. Historians is what he is. He's a Christian historian, but he has a YouTube channel, Truth Unites, and I just love his work. He's putting out a lot of great stuff. I got a book of his for Christmas called Finding the Right Hills to Die On that I'm excited to dig into this year. But this book, Why God Makes Sense in a World That Doesn't, was very good, an excellent apologetics book. By the way, if you want to know more about any of these books, my page on Goodreads I tried to do a little blurb, just a short review of everything that I read. I didn't do it on all of them, especially some of the rereads I skipped. But I tried to write just a little bit. So if you're curious to know more, obviously you can text me if you want to. I'm happy to talk to you about books anytime. But they're also there as well. And I already got to with the Clouds of Heaven. I've got my notes here. So low lights when it comes to nonfictions, the books that I would say do not bother with. I've just got one, and I was so disappointed in this book. So disappointed. In Quest of the Historical Adam by William Lane Craig. I was really hoping that this was going to be worthwhile. But it just was not. From the first chapter, it seems like William Lane Craig was seeking to throw out essentials of the Christian faith from the get-go: inerrancy of Scripture, authoritativeness of Scripture, um, throwing away, various details of the Genesis 1 account. Some of the things that he said, I could get behind. Yeah, that's okay. I can listen with that. But a lot of those first tier issues, he even his Christology is messed up. If you don't know about William Lane Craig's Christology, but his thoughts on original sin, a lot of this stuff just, I'm not willing to sacrifice those things to go along with what he says. I think you can hold to an old earth without going to the extremes that he seems to go to. And I think it shows, one of my friends was saying this to me the other day, was that it just shows that he debates atheists all the time because he's so willing to entertain every possible idea, where there's no idea that's off limits. And when we as Christians come to a question like, like, was there a historical Adam? There are certain things that we can take for granted, and in fact, we should take for granted, like that God's word is inerrant, that it's authoritative, and that we can trust what it says about God's word. And so disappointed. Do not waste your time and money on this book. If you really wanted to see what I was talking about, I'm sure you could find some YouTube videos of it. There's an ebook of it on Hoopla if you just really wanted to. But honestly, in order to protect you, please don't read it. It's not worth it. It's if anything, it's going to detract from your knowledge and your understanding of the Bible. And I really hate to say that because I have such high, lower now, respect for William Lane Craig. I think he is one of the best Christian apologists of our day. Like I said, he debates atheists all the time, and I think he does a great job defending the faith. But unfortunately, a lot of the things in this book, I think that he is making concessions that aren't necessary. I think he is going against Scripture in places, and so that's enough on William Lane Craig. Anyway, I was so disappointed. But fiction books. Like I said, I read a lot of fiction books this year. I'm going to try to be quick. I know I've already been going for like too long, but let's see. The Cosmere by Brandon Sanderson. I started The Cosmere a couple of years ago. Gosh, I guess it was 2021. I remember because it was around the time Leah was born. I was reading The Way of Kings for the first time, and that's the Stormlight Archive, which is inside the Cosmere. If you know anything about the Cosmere, it is Brandon Sanderson's brainchild, which spans multiple book series, multiple different planets and worlds. And because of that, every magic system or investiture, as he calls it, is different, but they're all related and they have some common characters and overlap. And it's so good. It's so interesting. But I read a good bit of the Cosmere this year. Not any of the Stormlight Archive. I had already read those. But this year, I finally got to Mistborn. And I have to say, Mistborn Era 1. So Mistborn is in two different eras. There's the first era, the second. I believe there's third and fourth coming, but those are a long way away. But Era 1 especially, which begins with, let me get down to it. I read Warbreaker at the beginning of the year. It was very good. Gotta find it. Mistborn, The Final Empire. Loved this book. I thought it was just excellent. The magic system is so entertaining. The world building, that's the thing that Brandon Sanderson really excels at, is world building. Some of his stories kind of fall flat. For instance, The Emperor's Soul, I thought was kind of boring. Let's see, The Frugal Wizard's Guide to Surviving Medieval England. There it is right there. I thought it was just okay, but again, the world building was really cool. It was a great idea. I just think he kind of fell flat when it came to the story itself. But the positive, okay? Mistborn was so good. Well of Ascension, The Hero of Ages, those are the other books in Era 1. And let's see. Warbreaker, I mentioned it down here. Tress of the Emerald Sea was the first of his 4 secret projects. So during COVID, he wrote 4 secret books that he didn't tell anybody about until basically he was ready to release them. He did a whole Kickstarter. It was the largest Kickstarter campaign in history up to this point. And so I jumped on that as soon as I saw it because I've just loved reading through Brandon Sanderson. And the first one that he released, Tress of the Emerald Sea, was the best of the 4 by far, I think. Some people will disagree, but I think it was one of the best. He describes it as, well, he's got it right here. For anyone who loved The Princess Bride, he describes it as The Princess Bride if Buttercup had not given Wesley up for dead, and if she had gone on this crazy quest to find Wesley. That's basically what Tress of the Emerald Sea was about. Did I give that 4 stars? I definitely should have given it 5 if I gave it 4. We're gonna update that live because it was so fun. It was just great. Cheesy in parts, but humorous. Really enjoyable. Tress of the Emerald Sea. I'll go ahead and do the other Brandon Sanderson while I'm here. I wasn't gonna talk about that until a minute later, but Mistborn Era 2. So you might have noticed that I was right next to Mistborn Era 2 and I didn't even mention it. It was disappointing. It was still good. Again, the world building is where he excels, but I feel like the story in Mistborn Era 2, The Alloy of Law, Shadows of Self, Lost Metal, Bands of Mourning, they were just okay. It was a big downgrade, I think, from Era 1. Bands of Mourning was the highlight of the series. It was definitely better than the other 4 or 3, sorry. But in general, Era 2 just it was lacking. Hundreds of years have passed. The events of Era 1 have kind of faded into legend, and the system of magic investiture has changed. There are now alloys, so I won't get into it. But anyway, it's great world building, lacking in the story. This second era is kind of a steampunk feel, whereas the earlier one was more traditional fantasy, not sci-fi like the Era 2. It was like a Western steampunk kind of. I just didn't care for it. But Era 1 was so good. Also this year I reread through The Inheritance Cycle, one of my favorites by Christopher Paolini. Aragon, Eldest Brissinger, Inheritance, and finally, Murtagh was released this year as kind of a sequel. It's coming just a few months after the events of Inheritance and told from the perspective of Murtagh. It was very good. I really enjoyed it. I think it actually includes the short story from The Fork, the Witch, and the Worm. One of the chapters in The Fork, the Witch, and the Worm was included in Murtagh as one of the chapters. So, but it continued along sequentially in the book. So, all of those very good. If you haven't read them, they're especially for teens, but I think they hold up. I think they're one of those series. It's one of those series that holds up even for adults. Here lately, I've been reading the Pendragon cycle. So you see it here with Taliesin, Merlin, Arthur. Currently, I'm reading Pendragon, and then after that comes Grail. So I'm going to finish those hopefully in the next couple of days. Might finish it today, but probably not. It's especially with the party later, New Year's, things like that. So, but I've enjoyed those. I decided to read those because the Daily Wire, the news outlet, right, has acquired the rights to create a television version of this, and so they're creating that. They've already been releasing sneak peeks of that, but have really enjoyed this series so far. It's so interesting. I've thought that how Christianized this story is. And you may think I sound silly for saying that, but in the Disney versions of King Arthur, or like the popular television versions of King Arthur, there's no mention of Christ, and nothing at all. But in this series, it's been very central. Christ, and taking Christianity to the heathen, and building up churches and things like that. So I've really enjoyed that spin on the King Arthur story. And maybe that's just my own ignorance, that I didn't know how soaked in Christianity, Arthur and that whole English mythology, I guess, how soaked in Christianity that is. So I've enjoyed seeing that. Other fiction lowlights here. So I don't have any hard copies of those, but ones that I didn't really enjoy. Star Wars: The High Republic. I was really hoping that those were going to be good. These are the newest released from Disney, by various authors. So let's see if I can find some of those. Light of the Jedi is the first one. Into the Dark, The Rising Storm. These were they weren't good. I just didn't enjoy them. I think I think in I think that the idea of them is very good. So the idea is there's this galactic disaster that happens, and all of the Jedi are trying to go to all corners of the galaxy to try to save the day. And I think um, the details of the disaster itself are told really well. And I think even the rescues are told really well. I think the characters is where this one is lacking. When it comes to Star Wars, we love those original characters. We love those prequel characters, some of us, and some of us even like the sequel characters. Some don't, some hate them, but with these, there's nothing to grab onto. It's different characters in every book. It's told from a different perspective in every book, and even every chapter is different. So it's hard to grab onto, okay, this is the main character, because for one chapter, you're following this person, and then for the next chapter, you're following these people, and then these people, and then these people. So it's just kind of all over the place. It's hard to, and maybe this was because I was reading it on audiobook and I just couldn't keep up with all the new and different names. Maybe if I read a hard copy, but I felt that way about every single one of these. So The Light of the Jedi, Into the Dark, all of these were part of, I think they called it Wave One or Phase One of the High Republic. I didn't even bother with Phase Two because I was bored, and each book felt like I was just trying to memorize names the whole time, and I'd never got to know a single character because that character's gone in the next chapter. Also, lowlights, unfortunately, in the Star Wars realm. Y'all know I love Star Wars so much, and there's been very much highlights in the Star Wars novel canon or whatever. But I read both Thrawn series this year. You see here Thrawn Ascendancy. These were the newer Thrawn books. So Thrawn Ascendancy, Greater Good, and then Lesser Evil, I believe it is. Um, I didn't enjoy them. I didn't think they were good at all. Not to mention, in the audiobook, you have the constant drone of an Imperial cruiser going on in the background, and the beep boops going on with sound effects that sometimes are really enjoyable, but in this case, it was just annoying. It was like having white noise in the background, like a big buzzing the entire time. And kind of the same way with the High Republic, I just couldn't connect with any of the characters. I wasn't enjoying any of them. I didn't think any of them were interesting. Thrawn was a little bit, but not to the extent that he was in Timothy Zahn's previous uh, canon Thrawn series. I don't remember exactly what that series was titled, but those I thought were actually interesting. But in this Thrawn Ascendancy trilogy, I thought it was super lacking, super boring at times. The warfare was all done on the capital ships, and so there wasn't much. There wasn't any really ground combat, no lightsabers, no force. It was just man. And I also read the Legends Thrawn series, Heir to the Empire. I was curious to see what of that series they would reuse in the Ahsoka show, and the answer is not a whole lot, maybe a little bit, but not a whole lot. I thought that book one was pretty good, and then the rest of it was just kind of, you know, it was better because it had those main characters that we know and love, Luke, Han, and Leia. They were all over these books, and so that part of it was great and introduced Mara Jade, which was very interesting. And so parts of that Legends series, unfortunately, it's Legends, so it doesn't even really count. It's not really relevant to Disney's canon of Star Wars, but they were better stories than this other Thrawn series. So do with that what you will. I already talked about Mistborn Era 2, probably more than I should have. Y'all, that's about it. So if you want to see or hear about anything else, look at my Goodreads, come talk to me. I'm happy to share about any of these. Happy to give you my thoughts. But those were really the highlights and lowlights that I wanted to cover. So for 2024, what am I planning? So I don't really know. I feel like 85 was a good goal. I feel like it was manageable. So I may just leave it at 85. I might up it to 90, but I also might not. And I'm not going to be nearly as strict as I had planned to be as far as fiction and nonfiction. Like I said, I really enjoyed reading fiction this year. I haven't gotten to do that with seminary and with college in a long time. And so I feel like I have a lot to catch up on, especially the Wheel of Time. I'm going to get to it. But so maybe 90 books. I might leave it at 85, but we'll see. Roughly half and half, fiction, nonfiction, but I'm not worried about that this year. The first on my list, obviously, is to finish the Pendragon cycle. I've got 2 books left in that. I'm over halfway with the 4th one, and then I have the 5th one after that. So I'm going to finish that and hopefully enjoy those. Then uh, the first thing I'm going to go to is the Percy Jackson series. So you might remember the Percy Jackson and the Olympian series, but it has just been released on Netflix, or not on Netflix, on excuse me, Disney Plus has just released the first couple of episodes of their series that's covering The Lightning Thief. These were some of my favorite books as a kid. A lot of people really love Hogwarts with Harry Potter, and I'm just kind of like, that's still school. I like summer camp. And so Percy Jackson, of course, goes to Camp Half Blood. And so I'm looking forward to rereading those. I was thinking back the other day, and it's been over 15 years since I've read any of the Percy Jackson books. So that's step number one. I'd like to hit some other Greek and Roman mythologies this year, and just books about Greece and Rome in general, just to kind of have a better understanding of the Roman Empire. That was a kind of a joke this year. Like, how often do you think about the Roman Empire? And I came to the realization that I think about it pretty often, but I do so in very vague and very I guess, not clear terms of like what exactly the Roman Empire was. And of course, that's the setting for most of the New Testament. And so it's really relevant in that sense. So I'm going to read some Augustine, of course, there at the end of the Roman Empire. I've already mentioned multiple times the Wheel of Time I'm going to get to. I mentioned the Stormlight Archive earlier. I'm going to hopefully reread the Stormlight Archive now with the better understanding of the Cosmere. The more I read the Cosmere and things, I was like, I was not ready for the Stormlight Archive when I started it, because this story is much bigger than I thought it was. And so I'm going to go back to Stormlight before book 5 comes out. It's projected to come out in December. He's already said that it's the rough draft is finished, so he's just got to do some polishing on it. So I'm excited for that. In next December, going to read through that. And let's see, I'm hoping to get through Kingdom Through Covenant. I mentioned it last year. It's just daunting. I mean, look at it. It's a monster, but I've been wanting to read it for years. And I think this year, I think 2024 is going to finally be the year that I'm going to do it. We Taylor and I got a stack of books from Able Speaks, the organization that we've been working with, that we've been walking alongside through our struggles with Hannah and with uh, her condition. They sent us a stack of books, and one of those was "I Will Carry You." I'm looking forward to digging into it, seeing or hearing Angie Smith's story. She went through a situation very, very similar to ours, and so I'm interested to read that and the other books that Able Speaks sent to us. Then Amidst Us Our Beloved Stands by Michael Haken, a book on the sacraments about the ordinances. I'm really looking forward to getting into it and kind of a historical Baptist perspective of it, of those. The bunch of books on creation that I'm wanting to read to hopefully undo what William Lane Craig did. I hate to continue throwing shade at William Lane Craig, but Gavin Ortland, Lightheart, Levering, Collins, Chatrall, Lennox, Morris, Swami Das. I've got a bunch on the docket that I'm interested in studying for creation. Again, I know that I'm not going to agree with everybody here. It's just a contentious topic, talking about creation, the days of creation, interpretation of Genesis, things like that. So, but I love studying that. So, like I said, I'm hoping to read some Augustine, City of God, and Confessions. I've never read those before, hoping to finally get to them this year. All right. I've rambled for way too long, and you've probably already signed off. But if not, thank you for sticking around to the end. I hope this is helpful for you. I hope that I've talked about something that you're interested in reading this year. If you are, let me know. Send me a text. Obviously, don't like and subscribe because I don't ever post anything, and I'm not trying to do that. So, but shoot me a text, comment on Facebook. Let me know what you're reading this year. If you don't have Goodreads, I highly recommend it, and I would love to be your friend on there. So shoot me a friend request whenever you make that account, and I will see you in whatever realm of life I see you, whether that's online or at church or at home, whatever. See ya.